the absence of time is absolutely crucial. I was fortunate enough to have been made redundant for a year. It was terrible because I had difficulty in surviving financially, but I can tell you I wrote much more during that period than I could ever have done if I hadn't been made redundant. So I was grateful at least at one level. The story I want to tell you is about my experience at the University of Dar es Salaam in the early 1980s. What I find extraordinary about the discussion so far, apart from Shireen's intervention, is that everything seems to revolve around money and wanting more money. When I was at the University of Dar es Salaam in 1981, I think we produced some of the most exciting, innovative thinking in the humanities in Africa at the time. And there was no money. There was no money for photocopying. I mean, in fact, we had to get people to type on skins and to Roneo it, if you remember, those of you who are old enough. We never had any of the technological gimmicks that we have today. And yet people produced, and they produced without being paid. So I'm a bit wary when people are constantly referring to questions of money and institutions in order to resolve problems, which I think are problems in thinking. And I want to get down, just before I stop, to some of these problems in thinking. Shireen obviously has an experience in North America, but I have somewhat of an experience in Africa, and I can tell you immediately after independence, the 3-year degrees were turned into 4-year degrees. Why could South Africa not do the same? It doesn't have to go to listen to what the Americans are saying. It can just go across the border. The problem is we don't listen to Africans in this country. We think we know already we have all the solutions, and it's us who have to be telling them what to do. And I want to, if you just allow me, Peter, because I think this is crucially important because it's missing from all the debates. None of the debates and none of the reports that I have seen actually talk about what the humanities are actually doing. And I'm very worried about this, because how can we talk about transforming the humanities if we have no discussion and no debate about what's actually happening? And what I see in South Africa, unfortunately, is a fetishism of the West. We seem to be constantly turning to the United States or Europe for our theoretical models. We don't seem to be looking elsewhere. We need to ask ourselves this question. I think is crucially important. Why was there no subaltern studies school in South Africa? Why does a subaltern studies school manage to see the light of day in India, but not in South Africa? Why? For those of you who don't know, the subaltern studies school was both critical of colonial domination, in other words, Western models, but was also critical of locally grown nationalism. In other words, why can't there be an alternative in this country between thinking outside the nationalist paradigm that John Higgins is rightly criticizing, but also outside the paradigms of the West? We need to be able to think from our perspective. And in order to do that, I think we need to become much more independent in our thinking. And without that, I think the humanities is going to be constantly stagnating. I'm sorry, but I have become rather cynical in my old age. But I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
I cannot but agree strongly with the previous and first contributor to this debate. Actually, this is a point that I have also been making here. And I think that it shows somehow, with all due respect, also in the sources and the references in the introduction by the vice principal. I think that it is essentially about foreign sources. I'm saying that in an academically and amicable way. At some point in the UNISA Intcom, there was an event with the Greek ambassador, to give an example, and a report on that session saying that presenting Greece as being the birthplace of critical modern thinking. In one of the documents that I have submitted to senior management, I have labeled that, such an assumption, as being a historical and cultural fallacy. And I still hold to that, unfortunately, until today. And this has been strongly emphasized by the first contributor. UNISA needs to look critically in the theoretical and methodological paradigm that we use for knowledge production and dissemination, and try to do it also from an Africa-centered perspective. In this case, there are paradigmatic contributions, fundamental contributions in the area of knowledge production and utilization by certain African scholars. And this is an established tradition. And we continue ignoring that. So what my recommendation is that we have a serious debate on that, and I propose on the contribution of the African school of thought led by the likes of Sheikh Anta Diop and Professor Obenga to knowledge production. We cannot continue every time that we have these kind of gatherings, you know, we go away and to fall again into the same routine. I think that it is high time that we start being serious in this university that labels itself as the African University in the service of humanity on these critical questions. Without that, I don't think that we are going anywhere. So this is a contribution that I'm ready to contribute to that, because that is my line of thinking and of publication, and I think that we need to do it. Now, in order to do that, there is another disease, academic disease, that we need to get rid of. It is the entrenched culture of academic territoriality here. You know, we talk about interdisciplinarity, you know, transdisciplinarity even, you know, like something that is a tune that is very fashionable to sing to. But after that, we fall into the entrenched academic culture of territoriality. I think that these are some, so let us have a serious debate on that, and with bearing in mind that we need to come out of there with doables, proposals about doables, you know, in terms of projects, in terms of revision of the curricula, in terms of looking again critically at the content of the didactic materials that we serve our students, training of teachers, valorization of African languages and culture, etc., etc. So I was not prepared to make a contribution, but by chance you gave me an opportunity, so I took it. Thank you very much.
I'm Professor Valerie Ehlers from the Department of Health Studies. I want to challenge us all to make a paradigm shift. Why are we so scared of plagiarism? Why are we scared of publishing with our students? When I publish with a student, I make jolly sure that that article is of a high quality. The best way of advancing humanities is by getting doctoral theses published, to put the knowledge out in the open academic domain, not to keep it bound within the pages of one thesis on one shelf in one library in one country. We could make a huge contribution to the students, those students of mine, doctoral students, and I have more than 55 completed graduates, postgraduate students. Those who have made progress in their profession and in the academic world are those who published, especially those who managed to publish internationally. Not all can, but some can. That's the advantage for the student to become visible nationally and internationally. The advantage for the supervisor are many. You can become an expert in your field, especially if you can select your students to operate within a field where you can help the students to get bursaries, where you can perhaps get funding and help your students. Once you get published with your students, the money comes to UNISA, which helps to have research output funds, which should help for future. So in this way, we could generate money within the humanities, but we don't, because we don't want to commit plagiarism. You can publish without being a plagiarist, but the paradigm shift must be made. Another problem is that we allow our doctoral students to end with incomplete business. If they don't publish, if they don't present conference proceedings on their doctoral thesis, I regard it as incomplete business, because it's never put out in the open domain, it's never tested, it's never evaluated internationally and with other experts in the field. It never becomes available to the rest of the academic community. If we do that, we limit ourselves forever and a day. Thank you.
Michelle Klaskan, Religious Studies in Arabic. I'd like to respond to Professor Hassim. You've convinced me we have done a wholesale import of the British system and it's a failure. But forgive me if I'm a little bit skeptical when you tell us to now do a wholesale import of the North American system. There's a French system, we haven't looked at it. There's a German system, we haven't looked at it. There's a Chinese system, we haven't looked at it. And even if we've looked at all of those, we still have to work out our own system. In particular, the idea of the 4-year bachelor's degree. We do have a 4th year, it's called honors. So what's going to happen at the chalk phase? What's actually going to happen? People are going to take the existing BA, the existing honors, bolt them together, ta-da, we have a 4-year degree. Where's that space for flexibility going to come from? I do think we need to rethink how long a BA takes, the BA itself. We have to stop pretending that every student can do it in 3 years, which is what our formal structures now insist on. But then, yes, I would fight to the death to keep the honors degree on top of that before they move on to an MA, because our BA graduates are not ready to do research.
I'm not coming from the humanities. My name is Gugu Moche, and I'm currently serving as the Executive Dean of the College of Science, Engineering, and Technology. And I worry at times that when we discuss the future of the humanities, we actually polarize the discussion as if on one hand you have the sciences, the rise of the sciences actually leading to the demise of the humanities. And I think what we lose in that discourse, in that polarized discourse, is that in fact on the flip side of the coin, you have a question that should be the future of science without humanities. That in fact, that science, that in fact, you could not have science where it is now without the humanities. That you look at the Leibniz, that guy, he was a lawyer. You look at Descartes, you look at, and you look at Fermat, right? Those are the guys who have made significant contribution in the sciences, particularly in mathematics, who actually were coming from the humanities. So the question becomes, how do we teach our students to be good scientists who are socially conscious, who actually understands the material conditions under which they operate, who can write beyond writing mathematics and science, who can write, who can speak? You can't do that without humanities. So our thinking of a 4-year degree, I actually am very passionate about that. I support that. But it has to be, what type of a 4-year degree is it? And I'm a proponent that on the flip side of the coin also, you cannot learn humanities without necessarily learning the sciences. So our 4-year degree has to be in such a way that it has a core curriculum where, in fact, the student, irrespective of what the major is, learns the sciences, learns humanities, learns all that. On top of that, then learns the specificity of their discipline. So for me, that's this thinking that does not polarize the discussion, that does not say one stands here and the other one stands on the other hand. And my second point that I would like to raise is that we started the discourse or we started this discussion by saying, in fact, the problem is the one of the devaluation of the old notion of a university. But yet, I don't think the proposals that we bring begin to address the issue of how should actually a university, what in this age, what should be a university? What should be the anatomy of a university? What type of graduates should we really be? And what should be the discourse? So I find that eventually we come with proposals that don't necessarily address what the problem is. And maybe if we can, if any of my educated and very learned friends can respond to that.
Can I just point out 3 things? One is, I think this point about the CP Snow divide, that it's the humanities versus the sciences, is a really important issue. This is not a zero-sum game. I think we're encouraged to think about it as a zero-sum game, but it's not a zero-sum game. And maybe the solutions lie in a closer approximation with the sciences. Just one little footnote to that. It seems to me that if you look at scientists who are doing applied humanities work, their default position is management studies. If you look at the rash of MAs that have come out on water, on AIDS, on all of these topics, they're not actually teaching the humanities, they're teaching management studies. And I think that's a really important thing that we have to think about. Second, to a point which has been raised is Michael Neokosmos' point about alternative perspectives, and the professor up there. The Charter report does talk about African knowledges and the cruciality of African knowledges. And the question of the 4-year degree, which I'm sure we'll come back to, is also raised in the Charter document. Shireen, and then we'll break for coffee. Thanks.
Thanks for all those. Thanks for all those questions. So, I agree that it's not just money that's the problem. But I also think we have to be careful not to romanticize Dar es Salaam, which we have to ask why it's declined as well, right, Mike? I mean, it's if you take in new students, if you had the elite going to Dar es Salaam, that's why they were able to do that. It's sort of underscoring my point. Once you take in a broader range of students, then you have to deal with the issue of funding. But where I completely agree with you is that the funding discussion is misplaced. It's placed at the level of how to create an elite of research active scholars, as opposed to how do we in the long term create the research active, critically minded young scholars who will shape the way in which questions are asked, exactly as subaltern studies did, that ask the questions from their standpoint and ask it in language and theories that make sense and shape those theories. I think that I didn't get time to speak to this, but I think one of the problems for us is language. Precisely, is that we have a system of higher education in which indigenous languages are not at the core. And that has a huge amount of, the number of effects that has on the ability to imagine our different world, I think is clear. And I do think it's in both the reports. So, I see also a very practical solution like making a language a requirement for the degree over a longer period, having the effect of getting people to think in India in their own languages. In India, part of the reason for the vibrancy is because people are working in their own vernacular languages and developing theory in those languages and then beginning to translate it. And that, I think, is something we need to also think about that here. So, so I'm agreeing that language is a crucial issue that we haven't properly dealt with. On the issue of getting doctoral theses published, getting students to publish, I agree with you. I think that's right. I think students should publish. All I'm saying is that the nature of the work in humanities is such that it's not that when you move into that co-publishing arrangement, you are entering a territory which is very fraught in humanities. It's not simply, what you want of the doctoral student is to publish and to publish on their own. I mean, we can begin to talk about it. I'm not saying that everyone who publishes with their student is plagiarizing. I'm simply saying we have to be very careful not to make one size fit all. So what may work in a model of a team-based research doesn't necessarily work in humanities, where we want students to come up with the questions. You see, the problem I have with me as a professor conceptualizing a research project and finding funding for it is that in the humanities that leads to me shaping the questions. In the long term, it's not going to generate the vibrancy and the new ways of thinking that are needed. So that's my reason. I think that it's not quite a virtuous circle for us in humanities as it might be in other places. But of course I agree with you that we have to get students to publish their work and find outlets, and from that point of view also local journals really do matter. I'm not suggesting we import the American model. Sorry, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is that in the way in which the university, in which policymakers seem to think, we're stuck in this hybridized model that's got its roots in Britain, and we don't look around. I'm not saying import wholesale a French model or an American model. I don't think that'll work. I'm saying look at places where they've expanded rapidly. Look at how they change systems to cope with that. Even in the United Kingdom, there's a huge difference between the Oxbridges and the other universities. Oxbridges still work on a tutorial system. They have different kinds of rules. We can't do that. So it goes back to the question of whose standards are we importing and why. And you're right. I think a well-educated person, which is the goal of all education in the university, should be somebody who not only can read and write, but can also count, can also look. And we see it so much in my discipline, right? So you look at our political science students. They do not understand polling, and they should be able to say the difference between a median and average percentage. They need to be able to think of that, right? So they need some maths. And I would certainly consider that to be a semester course in reading statistics would be brilliant. But by the same token, why is the Wits Medical School dropping the requirement that doctors should have to do sociology, a year of sociology? That's a problem. Why is the law school moving away into a very technical kind of degree, where it's training lawyers in rules and procedure, but not to challenge the law and to educate and to make new law? Not doing that. So I do agree it works both ways, and this Chinese wall between the two has to break down. And I think there isn't, I just don't think there is a one-size-fits-all model. And I think what's happened, what I mean by the scientization, is that all the standards for evaluation and funding are coming from the sciences. Not that science should not do it in the way that makes sense to them.